Hello, Real Stuff listeners. Today's guest is Jordan Younger. You might know her as the Balanced Blonde or from the Soul on Fire podcast. But Jordan is one of those original bloggers turned influencers, and she's someone that I've personally been following and have known in the content creation space for years and years. As I was preparing for today's episode, I started out by kind of planning a standard episode that I do with influencers where we dive into the 3 taboo topics of sex, money, and mental health. But as I was looking at her Instagram feed for some inspiration, I had an epiphany. So Jordan recently went through her second pregnancy. And if you follow her, you might already know she had a pretty wild experience. She shared a little bit about this on social media, but not in too much detail. And she only ever wrote the story and shared the full story on her paid Substack. So this information is not publicly anywhere yet. I knew that what would actually make for a better episode in this case, rather than just going the standard 3-pillar route, would be to dive into that story if she was open to sharing it on this show. As someone who is currently pregnant and has a lot of pregnant or soon to be pregnant people in this audience, I knew this would make a fascinating episode because it really does show a different side of pregnancy, kind of like a darker side of pregnancy. And just like with the car birth episode, I don't want this conversation or any conversation I have on this show to scare you or to make someone who's pregnant or who wants to be pregnant soon shy away from listening. I just feel to my core that the world is made up of so many unique stories and points of view. Everyone's situation is worth sharing. It's valid. It's worth hearing. And if you followed Jordan, you've probably been voyeuristically wondering what the heck was going on for her during this pregnancy, because she was kind of sharing things a little bit cryptically on her social media. She was using language like, I died and now I'm being reborn. Really fascinating stuff that she didn't get into, and I'm so grateful that when I reached out to her and asked if she would tell the entire story on this podcast, she said yes. As I'm doing more and more of these episodes, I'm finding myself just naturally gravitating more towards the story episodes, like this one, like the story I told about that follower of mine from Italy. I don't want to give it away if you haven't listened. Like the car birth episode, like the story of the girl whose friend wrote a book about her. I'm finding that you guys are gravitating the most towards the story episodes in terms of downloads and the response that I'm hearing from you. And they're honestly the most fun episodes for me to record because I just have an innate love for storytelling. I love setting up a story with a beginning, middle, and end and making sure it's clearly told and having that nice arc. As a producer, I don't love anything more. So I'm having fun kind of going in this direction with the show. And the episodes where I dive into sex, money, and mental health can be really interesting episodes. And many of the episodes we've done like that have been interesting. But all these people have a very similar job. So to dive into influencer rates and how much money they're making and how much they charge brands, it's interesting. And listen, if you're interested in the creator economy, it's fascinating. But if this is not your field or you just don't really care about that, I can see how those episodes would get repetitive. So I'm thinking in the future where I can, when I'm bringing on a creator, if they have an interesting story that they haven't told on social media yet, this platform and this show can be the place where they open up about something that people really want to know that they haven't shared yet. So we will see how that takes shape for season 2. I'm feeling really inspired right now, and I hope you love this episode. Let's dive right in with Jordan Younger. You've had this wild experience that you just recently went through during your second pregnancy, and I was texting you a little bit during it, but of course, when you were in it and you were not that lucid, you couldn't exactly explain what was going on. But I really want to use this episode as a chance to dive into what happened to you. I think it's really important for people to hear some different experiences, good and bad, that can come out of pregnancies. And I just really want to go deep on this recent experience you had. Is that okay with you?
Yes. And this will be the first time that I share it via audio. I've done some writing about it and that kind of stuff. So I'm happy to have this conversation with you. There's no one else I'd rather talk to during this time where I'm like not podcasting or anything, but just the chance of having a conversation with you while we're in such a parallel season of life felt so right. So yes, I'm an open book.
I love this. And just to start, for people who haven't been following Jordan, or maybe you didn't read her Substack, I just want to pull out a quote just to preface this
Okay.
episode. I have died and been reborn. Again. Life will never look the same to me again. I am brand new and I'm never looking back. And that's going to lead us into this wild experience that you had in your second pregnancy. So I want to first go back, to your first pregnancy with Atticus and just hear a general overview of how that pregnancy was and what sort of health you were in during that.
Such a good question. And just hearing that quote even makes me feel emotional because it's true. It was such a wild time, which we will get into. But to my first pregnancy, I was in good health, which was a miracle because I've struggled with autoimmune conditions, Lyme disease, mast cell activation syndrome, so many health issues from my late 20s to the very beginning of my 30s. And then in 2021, I was starting to feel really good. And that had been my goal for a long time, just get healthy enough to feel good and to start a family in a way that I can feel confident that my health is in a good place, that I'm not going to pass Lyme down to my children, hopefully. Just be an energetic mom. And I was feeling really good in early 2020. Got pregnant with Atticus in April 2021, like 1 month behind you. We
Yep.
were so close
I
on our
actually
journey.
found out in April too. So I guess I got pregnant in March, but found out in April.
Yeah. So I think we talked about this one time that the day that I got pregnant, you found out you were pregnant, which is just
Right.
a super special parallel journey. I had a few of the typical things with nausea, but it wasn't bad, especially now having had this experience. I know it wasn't bad at all. The hardest part of my first pregnancy was back pain, horrible sciatica, just debilitating lower back pain. So I thought I had kind of a rough pregnancy because I couldn't walk very well. And toward the end, I just wasn't very mobile. And then it was a healthy birth. We had a very viral birth video where I almost had him in the car. I drank castor oil. He came super fast. And then started to try to get pregnant again and ended up getting pregnant on the first try with our baby girl, which is such a far cry from where I was when I had Lyme. So there's hope for everybody with chronic illnesses, autoimmune conditions. I don't know if this is your experience. I would love to hear being pregnant with a girl. Oh my God, the nausea was a billion times worse, a billion times worse. So I had a rougher first trimester with nausea, dizziness, migraines, horrible migraines, and just immediately could feel the difference between those female hormones versus being pregnant with a boy, personally. Little did I know I would take a migraine any day over what ended up happening. And I also just want to preface this by saying I don't want to scare anybody because pregnancy can be so many things. It's a miracle, it's beautiful. Some people love being pregnant. I thought I'd be one of those people, like that I'm kind of like a hippie, crunchy mom. So floating around in the fields with my long dress, breastfeeding, being pregnant, like that is what I always envisioned. And that was not my experience.
And we're going to get into this third trimester. I just want to backtrack for people who haven't seen this viral video of Jordan and her husband in the car on the way to the hospital. What does Jonathan say to you? Calm down.
Just relax.
Just relax.
A whole different person came out of me when I was like, don't say that to me.
Yes.
Because also the baby was coming out in the car. Like we stayed home for way too long. I didn't know what labor was like. I was under the impression that labor always lasts for 24 plus hours. Let's stay home as long as possible. I did not know that for your first baby, your baby could just come out so quickly. So I was dilated to an 8.5 in the car.
Oh my gosh.
And I could feel him. Like his head was about to come out. And I was like, Jonathan, the baby's coming out. I'm in so much pain. And he said, just relax. And he had the best intentions. He was terrified. He's like, let me just get us to the hospital safely. But I was like, why didn't anybody teach this man to not tell me to relax when I'm in the worst physical pain of my life.
Everyone has a different experience, and I feel like everyone's story is worth telling and worth hearing. And especially with pregnancy, I think it's really useful that people hear the darker sides and some not so blissful tales, because when they're the one going through it, it can feel isolating to say, why is everyone else running through the fields in their prairie dress
Yes.
breastfeeding while I am sitting here in bed feeling debilitating pain? So I want to get into this third trimester, and I also want to backtrack and see if you remember. I was coming to LA in May of this year, which was, I think, just the very end of your second trimester or the very start of the third. You ended up having to cancel on our plans to get together to record a podcast together because you had bronchitis. So let's go back to that time. What was going on just at the start of that third trimester?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Such a wild time. So basically, I developed a really bad cough following just a normal cold that I caught from my toddler, which toddler moms know. Like, there's always a little sniffle going around. It was just a normal cold. It was nothing crazy. Atticus healed, which is my son. My husband healed very quickly, but I kept coughing and coughing. This was back in March. So I actually know it started on March 2nd because I went back in my phone at one time to see, like, when did I get sick? Because I really want to know how long this lasted. So at first it was just this very annoying cough. And like Lucie, I host a podcast for a living. So I'd be going into the podcast studio and I would have to tell all my guests, I'm going to be coughing a lot. So don't mind me. We're just going to have to take a lot of breaks. We're going to have to cut a lot of this out. And I'm not contagious. I promise. That's what I'd be telling everybody, because we live in this world now where people, if you're coughing in public, people are scared of you. This went on for months. So this was all of March, all of April. And then the beginning of May, we went away for our baby moon. We went to Ojai. And I think it's kind of that standard thing of like when you finally give your body some rest, you sometimes are hit with a wave of reality. Like, I've been pushing so hard. I put all this pressure on myself to get ahead before my maternity leave, before becoming a mother of two, trying to record tons of episodes, just do everything. And when we got to Ojai, I really realized I am sick and I am exhausted. Interestingly, that's when the cough just got way worse and turned from a bad cough into what I at first thought was bronchitis, which I still think it was, but also it turned into pneumonia. So to have pneumonia when you're pregnant is awful because you have a baby. Well, first of all, you have all your organs pushing up onto your lungs. So there isn't really a chance for the lungs to heal properly. When we got back from Ojai, I realized I have to cancel everything. Like, not only was the cough happening, I was slowing down to the point of just exhaustion. Just, that pregnancy third trimester feeling like I can't do anything, and actually like pushing myself because I care about my job and because I am a workaholic is really not doing me any favors, and it's not healthy for my baby in the womb. So I had people on Instagram telling me, hey, I also had pneumonia in my pregnancy and the baby came 8 weeks early. Like, I was getting all these messages and it was just a huge, clear wake up call. So I slowed down, started getting some different testing. It's very tough with like lung stuff when you're pregnant because they can't do chest x-rays when you're pregnant. They can in case of emergency, but everywhere from the ER to my regular doctor, everybody was telling me we're not going to do an x-ray. But it was just getting worse and worse and worse to the point where my family was like, you have to go back and beg for an x-ray because what is going on? I couldn't even say 2 words without coughing my brains out. Like, my ribs went out of place, my tailbone went out of place. My husband had to start sleeping in a different room because I would be coughing 24 hours a day and would keep him up 100% of the time. So time goes on. By the end of May, everything was getting a lot worse. And again, the cough like became the least of my problems. And this is when I started developing horrible colorectal issues. So I could tell from like the very, very beginning of this pregnancy, or like from the time that baby girl started to grow, she's really sitting in a very painful place. Like it's pushing on all of those lower organs in a way that's so much more painful than where Atticus was positioned. So I could feel this in my colon, in my rectum, in my bladder, and it was horrible, like excruciating pain. And then comes the end of May, and I just started to feel like all up and down my intestines. I could feel like they were on fire. But the worst part were the hemorrhoids. And I don't know if you've had to deal with this in any of your pregnancies, but pregnancy can cause debilitating hemorrhoids, which are basically just inflamed blood vessels in your anus. So, most painful place. They can either be internal or external. And I had both. So, I had them all internally, which is like hurting everything on the inside. But I also had them externally. So, they're out. They're out. Like you can't sit, you can't drive, can't stand, can't hold your toddler, can't even lay on your back because it's so painful. So I was always laying on my side.
I can also imagine that coughing is making that way worse.
Yes, yes. Thank you for saying that. I forgot to mention the cough. I think the cough is what really messed with the hemorrhoids because it puts so much pressure on everything in your abdomen and then it just pushes everything down. So,
Right.
yeah, it pushed everything right on out. And the hemorrhoids, I mean, I hope this isn't TMI. I have a feeling this podcast, we can say anything.
Nothing is TMI here. And also, another thing that you didn't even mention is that during pregnancy, people tend to have constipation, which
Yes.
makes going to the bathroom hard. And do you kind of have to push? I think that's where they would have
Yes.
developed for me.
Oh, totally. Not to mention just the pressure on the blood vessels and then
Yep.
the blood volume increasing to, I think it's 3 times the amount of blood that you typically have when you're pregnant as opposed to when you're not pregnant. It's either 2 or 3 times or more. So there's like all this extra blood, all this extra pressure, constipation, coughing, being prone to hemorrhoids, which I am, which they run in my family. I've had to have like surgeries before, even in my 20s, before ever having kids. So it's no surprise that this became such an issue.
You said that you needed to get a $400 prescription hemorrhoid cream that
Yes.
didn't even work.
Didn't work. Yeah, I went to pick it up. This was before things even got really bad. And I went to pick up this cream and I was checking out at the pharmacy and they're like, that'll be like $450. And I was like, what? Like, I have insurance. What are you talking about? And they're like, oh, yeah, this isn't covered by insurance. I had to get it. Like, I had to use it. And I used it. It might have helped like 1%. I mean, the pain was just becoming so far gone. So the hemorrhoids themselves were the size of baseballs. Like people don't even believe that this is
Baseballs.
possible. Uh-huh. And I had like 6 on the outside and then on the inside, I don't even know how many. So I have a proctologist, like a colorectal doctor who I immediately got in with. And I don't know about everybody listening, but medical emergencies always happen to me on like a Friday evening when like everybody is closed for the weekend and then you have to wait many days. This always happens to me. So this did happen on like a Friday evening. So I have like Saturday, Sunday, I'm like Googling colorectal offices that are open on the weekends. And unfortunately, like emergency rooms and urgent cares, they don't really have proctologists. Like they could kind of give you pain medication, but no one will give pain medication to pregnant women. So there, I was just totally at a loss. So I saw my colorectal doctor on a Monday. He was shocked at what had happened. I mean, I'm kind of skipping a lot of stuff. If you read the whole Substack, I also saw a horrible doctor who was like violating and traumatizing because my doctor was at a colorectal conference. So all the doctors were gone for like the whole week. It was horrible.
I do
But
think
anyway.
that part is worth mentioning. I could
Yeah.
summarize it for people, but basically you tried to get in with your doctor who was at a conference, as were all the other good colorectal doctors in your area. Everyone's at the same colorectal conference.
Yeah.
Except for this one doctor who you thought, how lucky I found someone, but should have maybe realized, why isn't he at the conference? Is he a good doctor? I don't know. And you get to his office and his way of treating you was just literally with his fingers trying to like poke your hemorrhoids back inside of your body?
Yeah, it was horrible. And that is a method of treatment for hemorrhoids. Like people who have ever had hemorrhoids will know. Sometimes a doctor will tell you try to push them back inside because when they're back inside, they get more blood flow, they're less painful, there's more of a chance to heal. That's what you do when the hemorrhoid is the size of like a blueberry. Not with what was going on with me. Even touching it to tissue paper like would be the most painful, excruciating, debilitating thing. So to have him do this without even asking me or telling me, like he just started doing it. And then they all came back out immediately because I was like, this is not going to work for my body. And then I finally got to see my doctor when he came back from the conference. He confirmed, oh my God, these are so horrible. These are so much worse than they were last time I saw you. This is debilitating. And the only thing that we can do in pregnancy is this procedure called infrared coagulation. And I was just so happy that there was an option. It could have been the most barbaric, horrific treatment, which it is. And I would have been thrilled because it's an option. And everyone else, from my OB to this other doctor to emergency rooms, everyone's telling me there's just nothing we can do until you have the baby. What they do is it's a burning procedure. So they burn the hemorrhoids and then it takes about 2 weeks for them to like bleed out. So I had to get that done every 2 weeks. Horribly painful. And after that procedure is when I stopped sleeping because the pain was, I mean, it's a barbaric procedure. I'm so glad that it exists. It's just there's no numbing when you're pregnant. There's no narcotic pain medications. There's none of that. I was about 33 weeks. I was asking my OB out of desperation, how early can I have the baby? Because I am concerned. Like, I'm definitely glossing over things, but I wasn't sleeping. The pain was so bad. I thought I was going to die.
This is something I do want to get into because this was the part of your story that was so shocking to me. And I listened to the episode on your podcast where your husband, Jonathan, was hosting, and he kind of told his side of the story of what was happening to you through his eyes during this time. For people who are not aware of what happened, Jordan says that she had, I think it was a 23-day streak of being wide awake. You had insomnia for almost a month where there were maybe pockets of, I don't know, you say 5 minutes here and there that you were getting sleep. We need to hear about this. I've never heard of insomnia this crazy.
The pain was so severe. This is what was keeping me awake. Plus, I do have insomnia. I've always had issues falling asleep, but it was the pain that was keeping me awake because I could do anything. I could take melatonin. I resorted to taking Ambien, all these different things. So first, I didn't sleep for like 2 or 3 days at all. At all. And I was starting to feel crazy. Like, this is terrifying. And then, of course, there's that anxiety of, am I ever going to sleep again? This is how I'm going to die. Like, this is horrible. And then I started, of course, as the human body does, at some point in the middle of the night, falling asleep for like 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, but never more than 20 minutes because I would wake up with this searing pain radiating through my whole body. I would have felt like I had slept for hours because just when you haven't slept at all, if you fall asleep for 5 minutes or 20 minutes and you have dreams, you're like, oh my God, I must have slept for hours. And then I would always look at the clock and no matter what, it was never, the max was 20 minutes. This lasted for all of June. So from June 1st, which I know because that was my baby blessing and that's when I had like the hemorrhoids really became a huge issue, until basically July 1st. That's when I finally became open to taking a higher dose of Ambien because I had to. I mean, this is a lesson in surrender for me. I'm the type of person who's really tries not to take much when I'm pregnant. I didn't even take Tylenol with Atticus. And this pregnancy humbled me because I had to take Tylenol on an actual schedule of like every 4 hours because I was in so much pain. And then I ended up having to try so many different things for sleep. I knew it's so much more unhealthy for my baby and me to just be awake all the time. There's nothing more unhealthy. The stress that it causes. Plus, I had in my mind all these messages that I've gotten from people on Instagram telling me, well, I had pneumonia, I had insomnia, I didn't sleep. The baby came so early because if you stop sleeping, like your body stops functioning. Then you also like can't eat, can't do anything. Like my body forgot how to do everything. I was terrified of eating because the colorectal pain was so bad, which is not a good place to be when you're in the third trimester trying to nourish your baby. It was awful. I didn't leave my bed also for 23 days ever. Atticus became my 2.5-year-old, became used to just if he wanted to see me, he'd come in here. We'd be together in bed. He also saw me writhing on the ground in pain in the bathroom or wherever I was, like screaming, writhing on the ground, which is something I never would have wanted my toddler to see.
When you're writhing in pain on the ground, you say you felt like your intestines were coming out of you. What was the actual word that your colorectal doctor said that you had that was like that was actually happening to you, right?
So it was a form of a rectal prolapse, which is when your rectum prolapses, which can happen in pregnancy, or I think more commonly for a lot of women, happens way later in life, 60s, 70s. But women who have been pregnant, who have had vaginal births, that kind of thing, that's when like a rectal or a bladder or a uterine prolapse would happen. So I'm not shocked that this happened to me because my body is so sensitive. And even after I had Atticus, I think I had a bit of a uterine prolapse. So I could just feel that things had really shifted. I did a lot of pelvic floor therapy. But with the rectal prolapse, that's when your rectum is coming out. So your intestines are coming out. And if there's anything more painful than baseball size hemorrhoids on the outside of your body, it's that your intestines are coming out too. That's why I was writhing on the ground in pain. I was using everything from that $400 cream to lidocaine, which is supposed to numb. Nothing would provide any relief. I was taking Tylenol. I was taking oxycodone, which my OB prescribed me because I was in so much pain. We also were hoping that would help me sleep, but it didn't, and it didn't take away the pain. My whole family saw me in this writhing pain, and I do think as awful as it was, it did teach Atticus some level of like human compassion.
Would you consider yourself to be someone who, because of all the health issues you've been through in the past, someone who has a high pain tolerance to begin with?
Oh, yes. It's such a high pain tolerance. That's such a good question. So, my friends who I've been friends with since kindergarten, they were so concerned, texting me constantly. They're like, if you're saying this, if you're feeling this way, we're scared because I do have a very high pain tolerance. Like, I have walked around with horrible, like chronic illnesses for over a decade. I was publicly wailing. I would be like in these doctors' offices, whether it was the proctologist or my OB or the emergency room, like uncontrollably wailing is the only word. And normally, even when Atticus was coming out of me and I was like having to check into the hospital, I could hold it together.
One of the hardest parts of the podcast that Jonathan recorded on your platform, the hardest parts to listen to was when he was describing some of the things that you were saying when you were just so sleep deprived and in so much pain. Did you really feel at that moment like not only like you could have died from the pain, but that you wanted to not be alive?
Yes, to both of those things. It's hard to fathom in now because it's behind me, and thank God I don't feel that way anymore. But yes, every single day for the month of June, I was like researching and wanting to be put in a medically induced coma until I was no longer pregnant. And that's why I was resorting to things like asking my OB, how soon can we have the baby? Like, because this is bad. This is bad. And I can't go on without taking all these pain medications. And I can't go on in general. And of course, he said, no, we can't bring the baby out early like that. That's not, just doesn't work that way. Which, looking back, of course, I wouldn't have wanted her to be born at 33 weeks or 34 weeks. But it was so hard. And in talking to some friends of mine, because I did a lot of research, like I found some other people who this has happened to, because I felt really alone. I really felt like this hasn't happened to anyone. What is going on? No one even knows what I'm talking about, including my OB. It was so isolating. The other women who I found who have had these similar issues, they all said the same thing to me, which were that they wanted to be put into a coma, to be put out of their misery and just wake me up when the baby comes. And that's kind of how it is for things like Crohn's disease and these colorectal issues, which just affect so much of your livelihood. Because some people, they'd be so well meaning, but they would say to me, just enjoy this time where you can be in bed. Just enjoy this time off. And I'm like, it's not like I can lay down and watch reality TV. Like, I would love that. I couldn't turn the TV on. I couldn't read a book. I was in too much pain. That was going on. And then, yes, I told Jonathan many, many times, which he hated hearing, I would rather be dead. I cannot do this. I can't do this for another minute, let alone another hour, let alone another month. Like, this is just not, I can't do this. Even in the best case in pregnancy, I think most people are counting down the days until the baby comes.
Yes.
So this was like worst case. And I was like, if she doesn't come early, I will die.
Having very little sleep for weeks and weeks on end, do you even remember that time? Or is it kind of registering in your head as you having been drunk or like out of sorts?
Yeah, it's more like that, because it's funny, like telling the story now, and this is the first time that I've told the story on audio. I feel like I'm jumping all over the place and I'm forgetting a lot of things. And that's because, yes, I do feel like I blacked out during this time, similar to being drunk. I mean, that was another thing, was like I couldn't drive a car for months because I wasn't sleeping. And I was also in so much pain, because it is the equivalent of being drunk. Finally, when I got one good night of sleep, which is when I surrendered, I took the Ambien. I actually slept. I think I slept for like 6 hours. I woke up the next day a happier person, a better person. I was still in so much pain, but I realized a lot of these really dark thoughts that I'm having have to do with pure sleeplessness.
You would think that if you are pregnant and you're experiencing debilitating pain like this and also not having slept for weeks, that someone could just walk into the ER and be like, I need to stay here until this pain is solved. Give
Mhm.
me some sort of pregnancy safe drip and
Yes.
I will not be leaving here until I can function as a human. But
Mhm.
my understanding is that the medical system really reacted poorly towards you as a pregnant person. I mean, obviously they have constraints of what they can do, and there are drugs that are not safe to give you. How did you feel going through this as a person that was pregnant? Like, did you ever just walk into the ER and say, help me?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And honestly, that was what I was asking myself all the time. And my mom, who didn't leave my side this entire time. And obviously, my husband, but he was pretty busy with our toddler. So every day, my mom would be like, we need to just call 911 and like get you into the ER, because this is not okay. And like you said, they have to just give you something. Like, they have to be able to help you. That's, if someone's in this much pain, isn't that what medicine is for? Isn't that
Right.
what this medical system is for? And so we would call, and I would say the benefit of being pregnant is you can directly call into labor and delivery, which is a part of the hospital, of course. And if you're in pain or if you're worried about, the baby and all this, like, they will take you in right away. So a couple times I went to labor and delivery and they checked the baby, just because I would get into these headspaces of like, there's no way that the baby is okay because of the amount of stress in my body. The baby was always perfectly healthy, and that always brought me a lot of peace. But in labor and delivery, they would say, we're we're a labor and delivery unit. We don't have the medication for pain. We have like epidurals, and like when people are in labor, we don't have like pain management. We don't do that for people who are not in labor. In the ER, I went twice, and there's things that they can offer you, but there was a time when I was like, you have to like just put me in a hospital bed and put me to sleep. Yes, with something pregnancy safe. Like something, I know it must exist, like something that will take the pain away enough so that I can sleep for like 12 hours and then I can go home and I can somehow function again. Everyone at the end of the day said, I'm sorry, you're really in between a rock and a hard place. There is literally nothing we can do. So it took me into like a deeper spiritual place inside of myself, because I had to remind myself this too shall pass. I was doing things like praying to God on my hands and knees. I'm a very spiritual person, but I'm not a religious person per se. So I surrendered. I'm like, I do believe that there's a God, and I need God to take this pain away from me.
You're way ahead of me with your answers, because I literally had written out here, I know you're spiritual, but are you religious? Because you started
Wow.
praying to God here. My understanding is that your healing from that cauterizing procedure took longer than you expected it to. But I would
Yes.
love to hear about, once you got to the 10-day mark, they told you maybe by 10 days it will be better,
Yes.
and you're still not getting better. And this is the point, you're just praying to God. At
Hmm.
what point does it actually start to get better, and what does the healing process look like for you?
Such a good question. I'm so happy you know the story well, because like you pointed
I
out,
feel like
it's
I
it's
know it
kind of
better than
like,
you know.
I think you do. I mean, I guess I did. I'm glad I wrote it down when I did, because now I'm like, whoa, whoa, that was a vortex. The pieces are all coming back together now. So exactly. When I got the procedure, it was actually the second time that I had the procedure when it became this painful. I had the procedure in the middle of May, when the hemorrhoids were painful, but nothing like they became, and it took exactly 5 days to heal at that time. So I had that in my head, like, this is a 5-day healing procedure, and the doctor had told me these hemorrhoids are much worse. This is going to be like more of like a 10-day healing. And when he said that, I was flabbergasted, because I just again was like, I can't do this for 10 more days. I maybe could mentally put myself through 5 more days. 10 days is terrifying. I just accepted it, and then was counting down the days. And when we hit day 10, and there wasn't even a little bit of relief, like not even the tiniest bit, I was really worried, and calling the doctor, like, you need to see me again. We need to There has to be something that you can do. Do we have to do the procedure again? It's not providing relief. The nurse who works for him said, well, I do want to let you know sometimes it takes like 14 to 21 days for like
Oh,
the most
no.
severe cases. So now I'm like, oh my God, this is just okay. So at least we're this far along. We're 10 days in. I can get to 14. And I think it was around like day 18 that I finally was able to breathe again. I had some people tell me that on Instagram, people who've been through this before. They said it's about like 3 weeks, basically. And then you will be able to breathe again. You'll be able to function. It's a dark night of the soul while it's happening.
And did it really take all the way up until your labor and delivery for the pain to go away fully?
No, so I do feel very lucky that after that like 18-day mark, after that procedure, I got the procedure again, and so it was painful again, but it was nowhere near the pain that it had been before. And kind of by like the 4th of July, which was only 4 days before my baby came, I was feeling, at least in the sense of the hemorrhoids and the colorectal issues, a lot better. Maybe a 4 out of 10 instead of like a 15 out of 10. So I was just so grateful. Like, I can deal with coughing. I can deal with even acid reflux, even though it was debilitating, as long as that colorectal pain is no longer ruining my life. So I did have basically like a week where I could kind of be out in the world again. I was doing small things.
When you're in your pregnancy and you're in the month of June, and this is crazy, and you have, a couple more months until this baby comes, how did you even know that having the baby was going to make everything better? Did you ever feel like what happens if this baby comes out and I still have these hemorrhoids and this is just my life now?
Oh, yeah, that was a big concern. But I think maybe because I've been through so many things with my health before, I just had such a strong internal knowing that this was pregnancy related and that I would feel so much relief after she was born. And then I also felt, even if I don't, because I won't be pregnant anymore, they can give me morphine if I need it. Like, I just felt so relieved that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, that I didn't have to then worry about this baby and her health and her safety, because she would be out on the outside and then I could just deal with whatever I had to go through.
I'm assuming you had to have a C-section. There's no way you could push a baby out with hemorrhoids. What did you do?
Yeah, so I chose to have a C-section and I told my OB probably in like the middle of June, I'm gonna have a C-section. I have to. These hemorrhoids are, it's just not something that I can risk. And from all the stories that I had read online about people in a similar position, oh my God, I can't even tell you some of the horror stories, people pushing out their entire rectum before the
Oh my
baby comes
gosh.
out. And I was just concerned. I'm too close to this happening. I mean, that's a full rectal prolapse. And I'm already in like the territory where this could happen. It's just not worth the risk. And I have a very, very close friend who's a nurse. And she told me, and she's a nurse, but she's also like having a home birth and like she has all these different facets to her. She said she would highly recommend a C-section because there's such a big chance that with the issues I was having, it would result in some kind of emergency C-section anyway, or emergency bowel surgery. Like, why not just plan it? Which is way less traumatizing, also easier on the body than pushing, going through labor, and then having to have a C section. So I had a planned C section for July 12th. And then I woke up on July 8th and by some amazing miracle, I was in labor. And I was so happy because I had been manifesting this. And I was due on July 24th, which is my husband's birthday. So there was really not any thought in my mind that she would come before the 12th, but she did. And I woke up at 6 a.m. having really strong contractions, especially because I have had a baby before. I knew without a doubt, this is it. These are not Braxton Hicks. This she's coming, and maybe she'll come really fast like her brother. So we have to act quickly. So we went to the hospital, and this was the unfortunate thing. My doctor, who I had the plan with, he had been on the night shift the night before. So we got to the hospital at 7:01 and he had left at 7 in the
Oh
morning.
no.
So we just missed him. And I was just kind of asking the other nurses and stuff like, can we call him because he knows my plan? Of course there were notes in my file and stuff, but it was a unique situation because I'm a healthy person. I had a vaginal delivery with Atticus. It went really well. So I knew that the doctors and the nurses were going to say to me, don't you want to have another vaginal birth? Oh, it looks like your hemorrhoids have healed. You should just do it. And that's exactly what happened. So I was put into a room and they checked me. I was 4 centimeters dilated and 60% of face. So I was happy. Like, okay, we're in labor. The resident doctor came in, and this is a whole other thing, but she was like, you're not having a C-section today. Sorry. Like, if you want to have a C-section, you can come back on July 12th. And I was like, well, I'm not, like, my body is not waiting until July 12th. I'm in labor. I know that this baby's going to be born today, whether it's in a few hours or at midnight. But, like, no, I am having a C-section. That's my plan. I'm not changing my mind. You don't know what I've been through for the whole month of June and what the risks are. And it's now I'm in labor, so I'm not going to like explain it to you, but I am having a C-section. And this was a whole thing back and forth. It was apparently a really busy day at the hospital, but this woman, oh my God. I mean, it was a horrible experience. And it was a lot of back and forth where she then said, you're not even in labor. You have to go home. And I was saying, I'm not going home. I know that I'm in labor. I know my body. I was having really intense contractions, but they weren't picking up on the monitor. But the nurses were feeling the contractions and confirming to me, yeah, they're happening and they're big. So it was kind of a dramatic day. And I don't know what the greater purpose of all of that was. There was a lot of added stress. But when the actual doctor came in, who's partners with my doctor, he said, yes, of course, you can have a C-section today because we can't refuse anyone a C-section. Like, we don't agree that you necessarily need one, but if you want one, then you can have one. So I knew I had to just stick to my convictions. And that was hard because of course I would rather have a vaginal birth. Of course I would rather not have surgery. Of course. But I also knew the risks and I was traumatized from where I had been. So I do believe the C-section was the proper choice for me.
It just shows the power of how important it is when you go into the hospital and you are in such a vulnerable state to have an advocate, whether it's your partner
Yes.
or a parent or someone with you who can help you stick to your plan when you are being swayed. Because there's a lot of, everyone has a story of something that the doctor said to them. I was also told to go home when I was only 2 centimeters dilated, but my contractions were so, so painful that I would have been screaming in my house.
Yeah.
And, thankfully I didn't go home because my baby came 3 hours later. Thankfully, Michael was there and looked right at the doctors and the nurse and said, we're not going home. So we will stay in
Exactly.
triage until, I don't know, until you decide that you can move us to a room.
Thank God. But I have had so many friends who have been stuck at like 2 centimeters, but they're in so much pain and it wouldn't be safe to go home. And they're in labor. Like when you're in labor, you want to be in the place where you're going to have the baby.
So you've talked on social media a lot about dreaming of having 3 kids. And I know you've actually talked about how you've already seen your kids, like you've already envisioned them. You know their sexes, you know things about
Yeah.
them. You even knew their names, long ago.
Yeah.
Now that you've been through this as your second pregnancy, have your thoughts changed about being even able to entertain the idea of going through a third pregnancy?
Yes. So it's something I think about a lot. And because I'm so freshly postpartum, like my daughter is 6 weeks old today, I know that it'll be a couple of years before I fully understand whether I still want 3 kids. I always envisioned it, even as a child. I always said I want to have at least like 5 kids. Like I wanted a big family. I met those 3 babies, 2 boys and a girl, long ago on spiritual journeys. I've known their names, like you've said. I've known their personalities. Jonathan feels the same way. We've talked about them for years, and there was never any doubt in my mind. And then the end of this pregnancy really changed my mind about pregnancy, at least for me, because there were so many times at the end of this pregnancy where I didn't think I would survive or I didn't think I could go on. And I don't even think I mentioned, but there were at least like 5 times in the month of June where the pain was so bad that I was fully blacked out, couldn't see anything, couldn't even get from my bed to the bathroom. And I did think, this is how I'm going to die. This is how it's going to happen, because my heart would be racing. I'd be dripping in sweat. That was something my body was doing from not sleeping, was like profusely sweating, and it felt really sick. Like, I'm sick. This is really not normal. And my lips would be white as a sheet, just not healthy. And it's very scary to not have your health. So I knew I can't do this again, because it would be so beautiful to sacrifice my body to bring another baby into the world, of course, because I believe that this baby should be here, this third baby. But that would be so unfair to my 2 kids and my husband and me, because I
Not
wouldn't
even to mention, and you.
yeah, because I wouldn't be there for them, or, for me, like I would, my life would be in
Yes.
shambles. But for them, they would again have to see me in so much pain, and I wouldn't be able to live life with them. I have a feeling, just going off the trajectory of my pregnancies, that each pregnancy would get harder. What I would do if we decide to have a third baby, is that I would explore surrogacy. And my husband's not super open to that. He feels that we would have some kind of disconnection with the baby, or like we wouldn't be as connected during the pregnancy, which is true during the pregnancy. But I've heard beautiful stories, and it's still our DNA. Like, I still think it would feel fine to me. It would feel different, but I'm not going to let like health issues get in the way of having a third child if we so decide to have a third child.
And after going through this whole experience, what would you say is your final takeaway or how you've been changed after going through this?
Oh, wow. That's such a good question. I think the biggest thing is it has made me so appreciative for life, for the littlest things about life. Just when I was in bed for all those days in such misery, and I would see people online, like on a walk to get coffee. The jealousy that I felt, just the pure, like, I wish I could do that. And I'm not talking about like, I wish I could go on like a European yacht vacation. Like, I just want to walk outside. I just actually want to stand on my patio and feel the sun and play with my child. Those little things that I hope and believe will stay with me forever that have made me so appreciative of the little things. The first few times that I was able to get outside at the end of pregnancy, but especially after pregnancy, oh my God. I was that person who was like, look at the flowers. Look at the sky. This is so beautiful. Like, flowers are such a miracle. And it just made me look at the world so differently. I've had health issues before, and so I know that sometimes these revelations fade with time. But my goal is that they don't. My goal is that I can always remember the simple miracle is being alive. Well, being alive and being healthy. Everything else is just a cherry on top. Before that, I was really caught up in a cycle of work and achievements. I put a lot of pressure on myself and I have to do this, this, and this by the time I have my second kid. Of course, I still have those goals for myself, but it just seems so secondary now. As long as I can be a mom and be healthy and get out of bed and have a functioning body, those are the things. Yeah, it's just the things to be thankful for.
And now you have your beautiful baby girl, Delilah.
Yes.
Being 6 weeks postpartum, are you feeling 100% better now?
I feel really good, probably 90% better, which is amazing. So, from the second that they lifted her out of me during the C section, even though I was fully numb, I felt better. And that was wild because I'm like, I'm
Wow.
numb. How do I? But I felt the pressure release for about 2 days. The recovery from the C section was pretty brutal. And I was a little worried, like, this is going to be a battle in and of itself. But then it slowly started to get easier and better. And I felt so much better even than when I was pregnant that I was pretty much fine. Probably 2 weeks post C section onward, I have felt so good with an energy that I haven't had since a long time ago. Able to eat again, able to sleep really well. And of course, it's hard to sleep with a newborn, but my body is able to sleep, which is such a wonderful feeling. I'm like waking up earlier and just feeling this revived vitality. My intuition was correct that this was pregnancy related. I don't wish that type of pregnancy on anyone, but the fact that it could end was such a gift because I know some people have to deal with these issues forever.
I know you've been incredibly clear with your followers recently that you're going to be kind of turning inward a lot more and, for lack of a better word, reserving your energy and, saving your peace for people who are really part of your community. And I know you've only shared this story before on your Substack, so I can't thank you enough for coming on here to my audience and sharing this. I just know there are going to be so many people who listen to it and who have also been through some sort of really dark pregnancy journey or another health scare and just find it so relatable. And, hopefully for someone out there who's having a tough pregnancy, but hears this story, maybe it will help orient them. I know not everything's relative, but maybe it will help them realize like it could be worse and I can get through this. If Jordan can get through that, then I can get through this.
I hope so. That would make me so happy. That's my goal, is to just always share and just be super open because there must be someone else going through this or something similar, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
If people want to find you and follow you, where are the best platforms to search for Jordan?
So you can find me on Instagram at The Balanced Blonde. And also I have a podcast, Soul on Fire, also The Balanced Blonde, which we have to have Lucie on so soon. I know you'll be going on
Yes.
your maternity leave soon, but got to have you on immediately. Yeah, I have my Substack. I have the Quantum Method, which is my meditation platform. And yeah, just all over social media.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing. I'm so grateful you
Thank
gave us this
you.
hour during your 4th trimester, and we're going to keep tabs on what happens, and we're all wishing you the best.
Thank you. You're the best. I'm so thankful for you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to The Real Stuff. I'm Lucie Fink. Don't forget to follow the show on social media at The Real Stuff Pod. And if you're liking these episodes, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a written review. It helps the show so much. And if you're feeling called to come on the show, visit luciefink.com/apply and tell us your story. We'll see you next week for another intimate conversation on The Real Stuff.